So there's a huge amount of hype around this beta. We've had some ups and some downs with it, but let's see, after all this time that we've sunk into it, let's quickly go through a few things that we've learned from the Battlefield 2042 beta. First of all, the Storm is awesome. The footage of the Storm in the trailers EA and DICE released definitely piqued many players' interests, but there are still a lot of concerns around the actual functionality within a given match. Was it going to be gimmicky, annoying like other weather effects in previous titles, or was it going to happen too often? All fair concerns, I think. Well, I'm pleased to say that most of those have been satisfied for now. From my experience, the Storm functions just as advertised. It rips through the map, causing chaos in its wake, but the map is big enough that if you want to stay away from it, you absolutely can, which lessens the irritation it may cause for some. The general weather effect isn't overbearing either, as visibility still stays clear, yet the stormy atmosphere does remain, unlike previous titles where snipers and pilots basically had to take the rest of the game off as a result of being completely blinded. Next though, things have already improved. Yes, the beta has some issues, but sources around the web have claimed that the build we're currently playing is actually a couple months old as it stands, meaning yes, they still have a lot of work to do, but there is some hope come the launch of this game. A lot of the issues we're seeing would already have been sorted out, fingers crossed. Moving swiftly to number 3, the plus system is great, but slightly concerning. I think we can all agree that the plus system is a good addition to the game. To be able to swap scopes, barrels, foregrips, etc. at a moment's notice is great. It really allows the freedom of gameplay that might be required on such large battlefields. So say one moment you're tagging people across a large open plain, but the next you're about to enter a building. Well, that 4x scope you have isn't going to do you very well there. The plus system says, no problem. Here, take a red dot sight instead. It is fantastic, and it's a feature I don't think many of us even knew we wanted at the time. But, and there's always a but, it seems, balancing may be an issue down the line. A well-known tactic at the moment is once a magazine or ammo supply runs dry, instead of reloading or rearming, you simply have to change the ammo type in the plus system, and voila, a fresh mag is almost there at an instant. Guys from Call of Duty would be heartbroken.
Switching to your pistol is always faster than reloading.
Next, something that we all kind of should have figured by now is that bots are really dumb. So this is the first time in a long time we're seeing bots in a Battlefield game. I feel as though my expectations were probably a little too high. Now, not to dunk on them too much, as again, this is only a beta build, but comparing them to the bots in the Halo beta, well, it's pretty much night and day. As funny as it is, watching a bot drive a jeep into a wall or randomly going prone in a large open area for no reason, it's clear to say the team with the most bots is at a distinct disadvantage. And that fact would stand even if the bots were great, but they're very rough. Like, barely passable for a campaign kind of rough. A lot of work is needed to be done on them, and for some reason, they seem to take up a good third of the lobby sometimes. I guess maybe DICE is using the beta to test the bots' AI, but I did want 128 player servers, not 80 player servers with bots to make up the numbers. Moving over to something a bit more positive though, the maps look promising. I know we only have the one map in the beta, but it certainly is good, and if that sets the bar for what's to come, I think we're going to have some great experiences on these maps. Orbital, the map in the beta, is one of the medium-sized maps in the game, so we have some smaller and some bigger experiences to look forward to, which I think fits perfectly. The map to me seems great size-wise at least, so if we do get a few more close-quarter style maps and then a few larger vistas to play in, then it will really mix up the rotation and the gameplay. In terms of quality and flow, it suffers from the same problem most Battlefield maps have done in the past, that stranded kind of feeling. You still have those moments where you're unsure where to go, the combat has ended at your flag, leaving you wanting to move on or attack the next objective, and well, sometimes you just have to run and risk the chance of getting taken out before you even reach your destination. Now, most of this can be avoided with a new tablet feature that allows you to call in vehicles at a touch of a button, but at the moment, it doesn't really work. So until that's fixed, it's going to exaggerate this issue just a little bit, I think. With that being said, it's kind of part of the Battlefield DNA and should be accepted from time to time. Another feature that's been overhauled is the flying mechanic, so helicopters have returned, but with every title, flying controls tend to feel a little bit different. Now, the feedback I've heard from the community so far is that it's solid, but again needs some work. The movement is slightly slower than usual and a little more unresponsive. It's nothing you can't get used to and it feels good, but compared to titles it feels a little bit jarring at first, particularly with the little bird. I've heard from my own experience it's a little bit floaty and a little bit harder to keep the strafing runs on ground targets on point. This may be for balance or just a style choice, but anyhow, it's not something that's truly going to get in the way and just slightly increases the skill gap. When it comes to gadgets, Battlefield has always been full of them, but this time the grapple is the best gadget by far, at least at the moment. We all know that more specialists are coming at launch and even post-launch, but right now, in the beta, as it stands, the grapple is the best by quite a margin. Just having the option to scale any rooftop, pillar, hill in an instant is a hard gadget to pass up on, especially when others that are available, whilst cool, are a little lackluster. Let's go through them quickly, shall we? So the first one is the syringe gun. On paper, it sounds good. It heals allies from a distance and can also heal yourself, but in reality, there are a few areas where it falls short. One of the big ones is your soldier's passive healing is pretty fast as it is, so by the time you or your squad have dealt with a threat that damaged you in the first place, you've probably already started healing automatically. On top of that, the stim gun doesn't really heal that much faster and takes a while to equip, and people will argue that it's supposed to be used during battle, but 9 times out of 10 you'll probably default to putting lead down range yourself rather than switching to a syringe shooter, at which point the med kit outshines it in most areas and it is very situational. Secondly, the turret. And yes, this one is actually pretty cool and pretty useful. I think it's the only one that really rivals the grapple at this stage. It spots enemies, shoots them, and can block off lanes and cover your back. It even makes a noise alerting you to when it spots an enemy. That being said, you can call in a robo-dog that almost does everything it does and actually moves around with you. So again, there is a substitute for you whilst you're actually using the grapple gun if you want. Then we have the drone, and again, it's not useless, but it does require you to stay out of the fight for some time, leaving you vulnerable. Yes, it's great for spotting enemies whilst teammates push an objective, but it's pretty limited in its use cases in the heat of battle. It's definitely a good gadget, but it's still not as favourable as the grapple. A little bit of a subjective one, but it is beautiful and demanding. Just like a lot of games these days, if it's graphically impressive, you're going to need the power to play it, and Battlefield has never been an exception to this rule. The Battlefield franchise has always strived to push the graphical limits of current tech, and though still somewhat held back by the Xbox One and PlayStation 4, it still manages to achieve that goal. And this point is hammered home by the recommended PC specs, with an Intel Core i7-4790 or AMD Ryzen 7 2700X or better being touted for the CPU, and either an Nvidia GeForce RTX 3060 or AMD Radeon RX 6600 XT for the GPU. It spells beefy boy needed if you ever want to get the so-called recommended experience. Moving on to number 9, identifying enemies is now very confusing. So back in previous titles, the two teams were split into separate factions with different uniforms. So for example, in Battlefield 5, the Americans versus the Japanese, one was always in a shade of green and the other uniform was a shade of beige. But that is not the case here. Either team has a selection of individual specialists to choose from, so your teammate could quite literally look identical to your enemy, with the only way to identify the two being a small blue marker above a friendly's head. At longer ranges this won't be a problem, but when things get a little up close and personal, that's when the issues start to arise. There have been countless times I've turned a corner and dumped a mag into a friendly, only for the blue marker to appear moments later, which is not only a waste of ammo, but gives away your position, builds frustration, and well, makes you look stupid. And finally, bugs, glitches, and yes, more bugs. Yep, it's a buggy mess. Again, caveating this with the fact that it is a beta and this build is a couple months old, but still, it can't go ignored. From the reticle disappearing, not letting you spawn vehicles in, enemies teleporting across the map, terrible desync on vehicles, and parachutes being stuck open whilst you're already on the ground. There are tons. Too many to really list. But what this has really taught us is to set our expectations for launch. This year has been a tough year for all of us, so it's also been a tough year for the devs as well. Yes, delays will help them, but realistically, if you look at the launch record for other Battlefield games, a few of them have been pretty rough too, lest we forget the Battlefield 4 launch. So let's go into this launch expecting at least a few weeks, maybe even a month or two of annoying bugs, and hope we're actually pleasantly surprised. Well guys, that's all from me. Have you learned anything from the Battlefield 2042 beta that I haven't listed here? I'm sure you have. Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. But if you liked the video, drop a like. If you're new around here, hit subscribe. Until next time guys, cheers.